I'm so happy that you're here because I was starting to flounder a little bit.
You're doing a great job.
I mean,
An absolute brilliant job.
I I was only, a minute away from getting up and dancing or something, and there are certain things in life that you can't unsee, and me dancing is one of them. So I'm so glad you managed to find your way on, and at least the first 5 minutes of this is going to be comical for people, So even if we achieve nothing else in this conversation, it's going to be funny watching my face get redder and redder as I try and figure out
Yeah.
figure out how this is going to work. I'm glad you're here. So,
So yeah.
so I did a little bit of an intro where I spoke about the fact that you took to blogging and have written books and stuff. So I think actually what's going to be really helpful if we can get straight into it is actually to go back to the start for you and tell us a bit about your story when you met Mark, a bit about your life together and the things that I suppose led up to the point of widowhood.
So I met Mark when we were in our late 20s, and we were together. Oh God, how long were we together? We got married in 2006, so we were together 4 years. We got married in 2006. Had our little daughter Beatrice when in 2008, and then just when she was 3 months old, I was up in the northeast visiting my mother, and he was down south because he used to work in GCHQ in Cheltenham. And he used to work a split shift, and I tried to get in touch with him this one night between his shifts, and I couldn't get hold of him, and it was very unlike him because he was very attentive on the phone and stuff. And I kind of knew instantaneously something was wrong. Anyway, I phoned GCHQ, and obviously they have lines into hospitals and police stations and everything. And it transpired that he had collapsed at home and managed somehow to get to the phone and phone an ambulance. And they took him into hospital. They didn't know what the hell was wrong with him. It was just that he had collapsed, and they managed to resuscitate him. And I managed to get hold of the hospital in Oxford, and the hospital in Oxford said to me, I suggest you get down here. We don't know what's wrong with him, but we're working on it. So me and mother sort of set off 8:30 at night, trundling down to Oxford in the car, and I got a message about half an hour later from the consultant saying, actually, you really do need to get down here because we've discovered he's had an aortic dissection, and spontaneous aortic dissection. He was 33 at the time, which was kind of unheard of for somebody of his age, and no previous kind of cardiac issues, nothing. So yeah, got down to Oxford, and fortunately they patched him up, and emergency surgery, and we kind of were told to go and live our lives, and it was a close thing, but he'd survived. But then sadly 3 years later he died very suddenly from it turned out it was a complication from the surgery. So he had the muscle around his heart had thickened, and so he had a catastrophic arrhythmia. That was how he died. So it was very sudden when he went. And our daughter was 3 at the time. Obviously, she was just about to turn 4. So I kind of was, I guess like a lot of our members do, sort of battle with how you tell children that that daddy there giving you your bottle of milk. He's not coming back ever. And whether to use the terminology like daddy's dead, daddy's died, or daddy's with the angels, or daddy's or what I did, which I said, oh, daddy's gone to work, and she's
right.
Yeah, and she was kind of like, I don't really believe that, but I'll go along with it. I'll go along with it for now. So yeah.
So from that point, then, after sort of telling Beatrice that daddy had gone to work, what was the structure of your conversations from then? At what point did you then, because our situations are different. Lauren passed away after a year of a terminal diagnosis, so I always knew at some point I was going to have a difficult conversation with Molly. And so I prepared myself as best as I could. I read books written by Winston's Wish, a really good charity based around, supporting children that are bereaved. And I, researched online about the best way to have those conversations and so on and so forth. So I was prepared, but obviously with Mark passing away so suddenly, obviously the daddy's gone to work thing was to buy yourself some time, I'd imagine, to figure out, what was the best way to tell your daughter that daddy was not going to come back, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I actually, a friend of mine worked for Winston's Wish, and that's I don't know, do they still exist, Winston's Wish? I'm not even sure if they do. This was, well, we're going back sort of 10 years here, obviously. But they were great, and they were, I phoned Winston's Wish and I sort of said, how do I deal with this? What terminology do I use? And it was very much, you use the terminology of death. You say, daddy's dead, daddy's not coming back. And, be kind of unequivocal about it. And, I sort of tried to do, and she did what kids do, which is what they call in, as you know, in grief terms, puddle jumping. So she kind of
puddle jumping,
very sort of, oh, well, where is he, and upset. And then the next minute she was on to like, can I have a biscuit, So
yeah, of course, yeah. I never forget the morning that I told Molly that Lauren had died, and for me it was the possibly the most difficult thing I've ever had to do in my life. And Lauren had done a great job. She'd already had some sort of conversations with Molly, but Molly was kind of like, well, can I play now? And it's from there that they start to process, isn't it? And then you get questions sort of drip fed to you over time while they try and figure it out. But
yeah.
I suppose that that open dialogue, it is normally, it seems like it's quite natural to you in every aspect of your life, but that was probably a lot more challenging.
Sorry, you cut out slightly there, Sam. You said, I suppose that kind of dialogue is...
It comes across that type of open dialogue is how you live your life in a day-to-day basis. You seem to be quite comfortable just telling it how it is and being quite open, but that must have been quite a different type of conversation to what you would normally have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as you know, with the book and stuff, and with the blog, I've always been very upfront about sort of, I suppose, the warty underbelly of certainly my experience of grief, and I kind of needed to express it in that way because I didn't feel like the taboos were being talked about. I felt like a bit of a deviant, some of the things I was getting up to, I was drinking far too much, and sort of spending loads of money and just being very kind of reckless, really. And I didn't feel that was kind of addressed in any of the grief textbooks that I was looking at, I was like, where's mine?
Yeah, of course.
So when I wrote about it, and I did write some quite frank, and when I look back at them now, I'm thinking, ooh, that was probably a bit too much information. But I do think, and a lot of people did get in touch with me afterwards, and still do actually, and say, thank you for saying that, because that's what I'm doing as well.
Yeah, well, you're normalising for other people, aren't you, and making them feel less alone, because actually there's no shame in trying to cope, and whatever it is that you need to do to cope, obviously being mindful of safety, but
well, I was fortunate in that
when you're plunged into these.
Now, I'm fortunate in that I've got very, very close family and friends who were kind of looking out for me, looking out for me, and I think that was really key in my kind of rehabilitation, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely, and until you've been plunged into those dark places, like immediate loss of a spouse, it's really hard to try and comprehend and understand. And I think that's probably one of the things that I try to do with my writing is show as many sides of it as I possibly can. I try to be optimistic about a future, and I'm much more optimistic now than I was, immediately after Lauren passed. But I do try and, talk about how it honestly feels and how, what types of things, because I think that's what's helpful. It's good for me, but it's what's helpful for other people. And did you find that, because you've always been a writer, I'm right in saying that you, before that was your career, right?
Well, yeah, I was, yeah.
And I'm right in saying that you felt like you couldn't write immediately after Mark had passed. But did you find the blog then became sort of a good release for you after that?
Yeah, I mean, I took a lot of notes, and I found a lot of notebooks after Mark died, sort of mainly sort of just absolutely kind of what the hell's going on. I just couldn't believe that he was gone. I think that was the initial instinct. I think, again, yourself, no matter how much you prepare for somebody not to be on earth, and obviously after the initial thing that had happened to him, the initial heart thing that had happened to him, you did find yourself I did find myself in the darkest moments contemplating the thought that perhaps he might die young. But that it was never something that we talked about. And then, so when he did go, and I'm sure when your wife died after her prolonged illness, you think you're prepared for it, but then the sort of fact that they're just not there anymore is just so hard to deal with. And that sounds like a really sort of, it sounds like a really glib thing to say, but it's just how can this person just no longer exist on the planet? And I think that's something that's really hard to come to terms with. The way of kind of writing that, and then I went to some counselling, and my counsellor said, okay, well, you obviously write and you have written, so why don't you try? And I said, there's no way I can write anything long. And she said, well, blogging is perfect because it's 300 words and you can just bang it out, and that's it. And it was I would say it's a sort of seminal step in my healing process, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, healing, lightening, whatever you want to call it, isn't it? Because I firmly believe that the more you engage with what's happened, the easier it is to deal with it, the easier it is to heal. And that I've certainly found that writing and actually putting down a log of what things have felt like has helped me to process them a bit. That's certainly my experience. And did you find that writing the blog helped you more than you thought it would, or how did it help you?
Yeah, I mean, it helped in all kinds of ways. It was, first of all, obviously just a sort of tapping rage into a keyboard. That was one way. But also just the people that were replying and responding and getting in touch and sort of saying, yeah, I understand, and share this with you. I mean, I'm all for the shared experience. Me, I need to tell everybody everything that's going on in my life. What do you think? And so actually it really helped me. It really, really helped me to sort of say, okay, so how did you get through this? Because I kind of viewed it as like a conundrum that needed to be solved. And I kind of couldn't, I just wanted to be, I'm 10 years down the line now, and I wanted to be 10 years down the line. I kind of just couldn't face that initial onslaught, and I just wanted some answers to how to get through it. So that's what the blog brought me.
And how did that then move into becoming a book? I mean, the Life After You book, I'm right in saying, was Sunday Times bestseller, part of the Richard and Judy book club. It was incredibly successful. It is incredibly successful. So how did the blog move from a blog to a book?
Well, I was with an agent, a literary agent at the time, who said to me, look, do you feel like putting this in? Do you feel like developing this into a book? And I was sort of, I hadn't even thought about it, to be honest. And then she said, because, I think it could help a lot of people. And so I thought, all right, I'll give it a go. And actually, I ended up writing the memoir in about 3 months, which is, a really short amount of time, really. But I just felt that it just kind of flowed. It just came out. And so it developed from the blog, but it was actually my agent who had the idea of doing it, and then a sort of spirited editor at Virgin Books who loved it and saw the potential with it, and and was very sensitive to it when we were developing it and stuff. And so that was the sort of progression of that.
And how far after? So obviously, Mark died, and then a few months later you were able to start blogging, and then from that to having a book on the shelves, what was the timeline? How did that work?
I started
What
blogging
were you
13
at?
months after Mark died, and then
Oh, sorry.
the book was published after 2 years. So it was a very short time scale, actually. The book came out in 2014. Yeah.
And did you feel that when the book was released, you were, in a very different place to how you were when you were writing it, or, a very different place to how you were when you started the blog, and
Yeah,
obviously
actually,
you talk about being 10 years on.
yeah, no, the process of writing the book was a massive sort of catharsis as well, actually, and really helped with my whole grief process and stuff. But I remember the day before it was published, my brother's a published writer as well, and obviously he's used to books being out there and stuff. And I just said to him, I'm absolutely terrified. I don't want it to be published. I don't want it to be out there. I was frightened of the reaction. I was frightened of public reaction. I was frightened of family reaction. I was frightened of everything. I suddenly thought, this is the biggest mistake I've ever made, publishing this.
Right.
But by and large, it was well received, and actually, I realise now that it was just kind of pre-publication jitters. It was, yeah, because obviously you're writing about a lot.
And so, you said there. I think you've got a little bit of a delay. Sorry. Tech is not our friend this evening, is it? You said there that you were the day before it published, you were worried that it was going to be the biggest mistake you've made. Was it anything close to that, or was it the complete other end of the spectrum and actually was the best thing you could have done?
Oh no, it was the best thing I could have done eventually. Yeah, it was the best thing. It was the best thing I could have done, and I'm actually. It's just something I'm really proud of, and it's something that it's there's some pretty how should we put it? There's some pretty difficult sections in it, and I know that my dad that was difficult to read, that part of it. But it's not something that I'm going to be embarrassed for my daughter to read. I want her to read it, and I want her to know that this was what it was like, and what it was like in the aftermath. And actually, when I read sections of it now, I don't really revisit it unless I've asked to read a section of it for something. But when I read back at it now, I think, oh my God, I've come so far. And if that gives anybody any hope listening on here, in that desperate kind of phase immediately after loss of a spouse, it's incredible how far I've come in terms of my own development, my own grief process, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. And when we were speaking on our little pre-chat earlier, we were talking about this idea that I have, where for some people, actually, when they suffer a significant trauma, bereavement, it can spur them on and inspire them to actually achieving things maybe greater than what they could have achieved post-loss. Now, people would never want to lose their partner, obviously, but if out of the back of something that you can't control can come positivity, that's only a good thing, right?
Absolutely. And, I think, what was it? How did you put it? Post-traumatic creativity or something like that?
Growth.
It was
post-traumatic growth.
Yeah, and I think that was quite good, actually. And I think the life that is lost was for nothing if you're just going to sort of, not wallow in it. That's an awful thing to say, but I think the best compliment I could pay to Mark is to go on and live my life the best I can live it, and create the best life for my daughter as well. And I think that we were sort of stagnated in this mire of grief that we weren't able to get out of. I know, he would just as I would with him. So, and it's a cliche, but you do only live once, and we all know that anything can happen, anything's around the corner. So, God, I think just live.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's
happy.
Yeah. Well, I talk about doing what feels right now. Certainly when you're in those early stages of bereavement and losing a spouse, I know I couldn't, look past the next hour, and I had to build myself up to looking past the next day. And so everything was just about making the next right decision. I actually, and this is going to sound really, I don't even know if I want to say this, but when watching Frozen 2 with my little girl, there's a song in it that Anna sings called do the next right thing, and the thing choked me up. The song made me like actually no, this, that's how it feels to be in that moment, and actually how Disney managed to capture that in a song was ridiculous. But
Yeah.
and I'm gonna regret putting that on an Instagram live that's going to be in the archives forever. But
No, that's everybody, you see.
So, I mean, just I want to touch on this, and part of this is because, and I'm definitely going to email. I hope you don't mind afterwards, because writing a book is something that I see that I would want to do at some point. I don't know if it would ever be as successful as yours, but it's something I think would be a good part of my journey. But what's life like as a published author? How does it feel to be a Sunday Times bestseller, and what does that feel like? So that's not even related to your grief, really. That's just about something that must have felt good for you. Or it could have been, I know we spoke about earlier, I had a big achievement, probably about 4 or 5 months after Lorna passed away. And immediately after that big achievement, I felt desperately sad because I didn't have somebody to share that with. So, what was it like being a published author, or what is it like being a published author?
I mean, obviously it's bittersweet because, Mark was always really supportive of my writing career, and, so to have gone on and had the success that I've had, it's I'm sad that he's not witnessing that. But, I mean, actually it's fairly thankless. I'm honest with you. It's a lot of waiting around for people to, to come back to you on things, and it's a hellish process, and it's a long process, and but you've just got to keep going with it. It's a passion. You have to love doing it.
I can imagine. I can imagine. And I imagine it's quite arduous as well when you're going through editing and all of that sort of stuff. But the payoff for you was incredible, right? Because you were celebrated for your work, and that's incredible. And in again, talking about a world where there isn't anything you can do about losing your partner, if they can become your muse for some such inspirational and positive stuff, that's good too, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's something that he would be proud of as well, which is nice.
Right. And so you mentioned a couple of times that you're now 10 years down the line, and obviously that means Beatrice is now 13 or 14, and how's life now? What's life like in the world for you now?
Life's good. I've got I'm in a new relationship with a widower who we've kind of said before that, and again, I don't know how our members feel about this, but it's something about the shared experience of dating and somebody who else has been widowed. There's this kind of this intrinsic understanding between you of sort of I've got pictures of Mark around the house, and he's got pictures of his partner around the house, and that would be weird under any other situation, but it's kind of it's nice because it's for our daughters, that they keep that memory alive, and we just have a sort of we just have an understanding between us. So relationship wise, that's what's happening. My daughter, as he says, just turned 14, and she's absolutely fantastic. She still talks about Dad, asks a lot of questions. I mean, one of the things, and again, maybe your members with kids have experienced this. I know there are members without kids, but just one of the things that she she says it, obviously she was so tiny when he died, she sort of says it feels odd to me to say the word Dad and to say Daddy, and she said, what do I call him? I don't know this man. And actually she writes prolifically as well, and she draws prolifically, and I've found some kind of fairly sad stuff that she's written about, not just seeing a figure on a photograph and not knowing who he is or how he sounded or what made him tick. And I find that really sad. I think, oh God, how could you not know Mark? How could you not know him? Because he's so that's the
how do you keep that? How do you keep Mark alive for her then? And how is she getting support for that sort of stuff? Is there stuff that she's doing, or does she need it? Maybe that's just part of what she feels, and that's okay. But what do you do with that sort of stuff?
I mean, in the early days, I was very conscious about getting a counselling and, you know, let's express through play and all this sort of stuff. And now if she wants it, she knows she can ask for it. But we just talk, you know, if she's got any questions at all, I just answer them in that same way that Women's Wish suggested. Just be very straightforward. Don't hide behind euphemisms or anything. Just be very honest, and I think that's the best you can do. And you know, just talk about it. Say, oh, your dad loved this show, or your dad, you know. And she looks like him. She looks very like him. She looks nothing like me. I'm like, you know, God, you're just like him. Which is a comfort as well, you know, for me. But I don't know I don't know down the line how that's gonna develop. I don't know. You don't know how their grief will manifest as they get older and they begin to understand more about it. But I'm kind of prepared for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's about just doing, like you use the term there, the best you can do. And do you know what? That's good enough. Isn't it? You know, there isn't any right or wrong, and there's no perfection out there. Is just do the best you can do. I noticed a comment earlier about when I'd mentioned about the next right thing, and somebody had commented to say, oh, I'm just doing the next thing, I'm not sure it's right. Well, as long as you're doing the best you can, that's all that can be asked of you. You know, you deal with in young widowhood, in bereavement, in grief, there's some quite heavy mental health side effects of what you go through, and actually as long as you're trying your best and you're doing whatever you can, then progress is not perfection, right? You know, and progress is not linear. Sometimes you'll feel like you're doing well and you might take a few steps back, but then you'll go a few steps forward, and you know, it's all about just being kind to yourself, I think. So let's talk about Way then, because obviously you were a member of Way early on in your journey. How did that help? Did it help? You know, I'm sure it did, because you're advocating and supporting us with this Instagram Live. And what did Way do, you know, as part of your journey with young widowhood?
Well, it was what I said earlier about the shared experience. I mean, I've always been a sharer, and you know, I needed to find people in the same position as me. It was like life or death. And I remember literally like a month after he died, I was just, how the hell am I going to get through this? How the hell am I going to, as you say, how am I going to get through the next day, month, year? And I contacted Cruse Bereavement because I wanted some counselling, and they said, oh, we don't have any counsellors ready in your area. And I kind of advocated at that point like a sort of bereavement first aid, you know, sort of first responder to come in, because I felt so desperate at that point. I didn't feel suicidal. I just felt absolutely desperate as to how the hell do I get through this? So a friend of mine did some research. She came across Way, which seemed to be the only organisation in the country that supported young widows. And anyway, I contacted them, got into them, and that was the turning point. And it was kind of, you know, I joined the Facebook group, and you would just tap away and they'd say, go away for an hour and then come back. Don't even think about getting through the next day. Get through the next hour and then come back and report in of what you've done. So go away, do something for an hour, come back. Right, I'm back now. Okay, how was that? Come back another hour. So it was just having that kind of support of people that understood. I mean, it was kind of a relief, you know. And I remember at the time actually thinking there were people in my position who were 10 years down the line, and I was like, that just seems unattainable. I just can't imagine being that far down the line. And then yet here I am, and I've survived. So well, and that was, you know, that was something that Way did for me, was those people. So the level of grief and emotion that people are feeling, and let's not forget as well that, you know, when you lose a spouse or a partner, it's not just the grief and the emotion. Your everyday changes. Your life is built around a person. So the running of your home, you know, whether you know, for me, I was fortunate enough that I was pretty much the main breadwinner in our household anyway. So I
found it easy to adjust, or not easy, but more comfortable to adjust financially than perhaps Lauren would if it was the other way around. But you're dealing with, you know, all sorts of other really practical things that just add to your pressure and your stress. And I think Way is a great community of people that have been through that sort of stuff, can offer you advice on how they navigated it. It can be pretty intense at times because people have got pretty severe emotions going on. But then for everybody that's really struggling, there are, you know, tens, hundreds of people that offer them great support. And just seeing that was inspiring for me. It gave me, you know, a flicker of light at what looked like a very long and dark, and like you, a stage that I didn't think or see that I could get to. Just seeing that there was people that had made it 5 or 10 years was, you know, enough to just keep pulling me through a little bit further and a little bit further. And then almost to the point where I felt like I wanted to be that light for some people, in the same way that you talked about your blog being a resource and things like that. So Way is, you know, and one of the things that almost saddens me a little bit is that you said that you had to do some research to find them. And that's one of the difficult things. And I talk about Way being a charity that you don't know you need until you need it, right? It's not like a big cancer charity where, you know, you've got big TV advertising campaigns and everybody knows who they are and everybody fundraises for them. You don't know about Way until you're widowed and you're struggling. And the fact that people have to research that is kind of one of the reasons that I want to do these Instagram lives and keep talking about it, and because, you know, I was lucky that I heard about Way shortly before Lauren died, and, you know, therefore could join pretty quickly and get that, you know, that sort of feeling of, you know, not feeling so isolated, talking amongst people that could understand. But there are people that don't know about it and therefore don't get that support until much further down the line. So it's great that Way helped you, you know, at that point. And
I think as well, it's so isolating, isn't it, being a young widow? I think, you know, widowhood, you always kind of think of it as being older people, but I think when you find yourself widowed young, all of your friends are either getting married or they're, you know, getting divorced maybe, or, you know, that nobody's really navigating spousal loss. And I remember feeling very lonely and isolated in that respect as well. And that was another way that Way really helped, is that, you know, okay, so I'm not a freak. There are loads of people in this situation, you know.
Yeah, and what was there? The other thing is, people that aren't in that situation, that their words don't mean as much, right? Because how can they offer you comfort when they don't know how it feels? And that's something that I find with Way is, you know, sort of a really big part of what it offers. You know, it's just that.
Well, that's true.
Sense of camaraderie.
Interesting that you should say that, because I think, you know, my partner, I said, who's a widower, and we kind of sort of have a bit of a laugh about grief and loss and bereavement in a way that you would never admit anybody else, but because we kind of understand that, we have that shared understanding of, like, you know, we can sort of have a bit of a joke about it, and not a joke as in
I know what you mean, but I can't say I'm surprised, because given the chat we had earlier, and
I think
that you said in it,
it's that level of understanding, isn't it, that you think, okay, well, you know, I'm willing to take this from somebody who's been through it.
Of course, absolutely. So then, you know, we've talked about, you know, the journey, we've talked about the blog and the book, and I'm really interested to know what the future holds and what projects you've got in the pipeline and what's next.
Well, I mean, I've just found myself writing about grief all the time, grief and loss. So my current project is, I'm determined to get something on the TV about something, you know, a sort of comedy drama actually about grief, exploring stuff that perhaps hasn't been explored before in other comedy. So I've got a script at the moment that's currently out doing the rounds of various TV companies. So I'm hoping to have some news on that. I can't really say too much on that, but yeah.
No.
So waiting about that. I've got a short film that I'm doing about a young widow as well. Again, funny. Widowhood, but funny.
Yeah, I mean, who'd have thought it?
How I deal with it, it's got to be gallows or bust, really. Yeah, so that's what's coming at the moment.
Great. And just to start bringing us to a close, and I've done this with everybody that I've spoken to so far, and it's almost like a dual pronged question. So it's about drawing on your experience and whether you would have any advice for people who are young widows that might want to be a writer, or might see writing as a good avenue for them. But then for people that are widowed and young in general, what would your tips and advice for sort of navigating early days through to where you are now?
Well, from the writing perspective, I've always been a massive advocate as writing as a therapeutic tool. I just think there's nothing better for me, and I think I've run sort of grief writing workshops for people, and the results are sort of stark. I think it can really help you move on, just to kind of express something on a page. So I've always been a massive advocate of that. So if it is something that you're thinking about doing, check out my blog, check out your blog, and there's loads of other brilliant blogs out there. I know that loads of widows and widowers are blogging, and there's also loads of brilliant books. And I know that it's Way have got a fantastic library sort of list of bibliography, I guess, of different books on grief, which is worth checking out. And then, God, words of advice, it's just, I just think just keep plugging on. Like, as I say, I 10 years just seemed like so far, but actually you get there one step at a time. Just take it one step at a time. And,
yeah, I mean, that's great advice, one step at a time.
Yeah, one step at a time, and whatever it takes to get you there as well. So, we haven't touched on stuff like antidepressants or any kind of, there's the jury's out on stuff like that, but I kind of used every resource available to me: counselling, talking to friends, Way, everything. I just went for it all.
Went whole hog. Yeah, and why not? Because actually, desperate times lead to desperate measures, right? And you kind of just have to do what you do to survive. And it sounds like you through your everything at survival, and kind of I wrote a blog about 12 months after that I titled From Surviving to Living.
Yeah.
And it does feel like in those early days that you're just fighting to survive, because it feels like everything's against you. You're dealing with so many different things at once. You feel lonely, you feel isolated, and it just does feel like you're in survival mode, only sort of living from 1 hour to the next, and not being able to, people would ask me if I wanted to go for dinner that night, and I'd be like, do you know what, I don't know right now. Can I let you know a little bit later? And it took me a little while to feel okay with being that way. It took me, but people understood, and I think it's important to do what's right for you right now, and one step at a time, like you say. I definitely echo that sentiment, and I think it's a great bit of advice. So I think,
and also, can I just say one last thing? Also, to recognise that it's an ongoing process; it's never going to come to an end. So I still grieve for Mark to this day, but it just gets less. There's the old life gets bigger around the grief, but it never goes away. So, but you just learn how to cope with it.
Well, no, absolutely. And do you know what? I never really, I lost my dad at a young age. I was 19 when my dad passed away, but I didn't really engage in that grief and that bereavement in the same way that I did when Lauren died. And I kind of just bought into this whole, time's a healer thing. I'll just get better in time. But what I didn't realise I'd done with the passing of my dad was not deal with it. I just pushed it down and suppressed it. And, as a result, caused lots of other challenges that I'm now trying to sort of iron out. Dealing with Lauren's death was much more challenging in lots of ways, but has forced me to address some of those things. And I feel like I'm a better version of myself now because of what I've been through. And, I think that's only a good thing for me.
Yeah.
You just, like you say, it's an ongoing process, and do whatever you can to get there, but don't be too hard on yourself on the way. If, you don't make the best decisions all the time, you've got to do what you can do.
100%.
So I think again, I'm just going to check the time because every week so far I've had to say, oh, we're getting nearly an hour because apparently I like to talk. I don't think Way are going to ask me to do these again because I put them close to the mark every time. But I just like to, I'd just like to thank you, Lucy, for taking the time to speak to us. I'll draw reference to your blog, which is wifeafterdeath.com, which you've referenced yourself as a resource for, people that are going through similar things. You can buy the book Life After You on Amazon, or other online retailers, obviously. I know that you've got another book, Me After You, is that right?
No, it's the same book. So Life After You was rebranded for Richard and Judy because there's there's another book called, is it by Jojo Moyes, Me Before You, and Judy didn't want the two, so it's been rebranded.
Well, I apologise for my mistake there, but I'm glad you cleared it out because I was going to go and try and buy another copy of another book. So, because I said to you earlier, I've started reading Life After You, and one of the things that I mentioned to you on the phone earlier was how open and honest it felt in just the first sort of 20 pages, and it was interesting, to read about it in the way that you've written it. I found it really interesting and inspiring as well about how open and honest that you write about stuff. So that's, I really appreciate that. Thank you. So all that's left for me to do, Lucy, is to remind people that I'm here again next Tuesday. So hopefully they won't see me floundering at the start for 5 minutes while I try and get technology to work again. But I'm
sorry.
You're right. It's my fault because I said so confidently earlier, we won't need to do the trial. We'll be all right. We'll press for time to go on our school runs. And I was like, hey, it'll be fine. You just got to do X, Y, Z. And it didn't quite work that way, but we got there in the end. Next week, I'm going to be talking to Steph Nimmo, who has a blog, has written 2 books that have been in the Amazon top 10 bestselling list. So we've got some great guests on this. And after that, Emma's going to be talking to Holly Matthews, who is also quite prominent in the young widow community, has gone on to, is writing books, is a life coach of some description, also from the Northeast, I believe. So maybe it's something about you lasses is the term you use, isn't it, from the Northeast, that makes you want to write, good books. So you can, you can catch up with all the previous chats on the Way Instagram TV channel and on YouTube, and I'm going to close there. So I've been Sam, and this is Lucy. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, everyone.
See you later.
Bye.